Close your eyes for a moment and imagine this. You wake up one day, and everyone you thought would be there forever vanishes. Not dramatically, not with fireworks or grand betrayals, but with the quiet cruelty of absence. A best friend who once knew your secrets now treats you like a stranger. A partner who once whispered promises now carries silence in their pockets. Family members, once anchors, now feel like distant islands, and there you stand, surrounded by empty spaces where voices used to be. No goodbyes, no clear explanations, just the echo of their absence, louder than any scream. What would you do in that moment? Would you cling harder, chasing after shadows, begging them to return? Would you blame yourself, convinced that somehow their leaving is proof of your unworthiness? Or would you stand, still terrified, broken, and yet strangely free-forced to face the question you've been avoiding your entire life? If no one remains, who are you without them? We spend so much of our existence building ourselves out of others. You are someone's friend, someone's child, someone's lover, someone's savior. Your worth becomes tied to the way they look at you, the way they need you, the way they stay. But what happens when they don't? What happens when the roles collapse, the identities crumble, and the mirrors you used to see yourself in shatter one by one? Here's the paradox. Losing everyone feels like the end of life as you know it, yet it is also the one event that might finally return you to yourself. And yet, you resist this truth. Because to lose everyone is to lose meaning, to lose certainty, to lose belonging, and no creature fears anything more than isolation. But what if isolation is not the death sentence you've imagined? What if it is the door? Think about it. How many times have you tolerated disrespect just to keep someone close? How many times have you silenced your own needs because you feared they would walk away? How many times have you traded your dignity for crumbs of affection, as if scraps from others could ever sustain the hunger of your soul? And then, when they inevitably left, didn't it feel like the world was collapsing? But here's the truth that lurks beneath the pain. Perhaps the collapse wasn't punishment. Perhaps it was liberation. Because if you can survive the silence that follows abandonment, if you can survive the nights when no one answers your messages, when the phone stays cold, when you eat dinner alone and wonder if anyone even notices you exist, if you can survive that, then maybe, just maybe, you are finally ready to stop begging for permission to exist. But let's not rush to comfort. Sit with the tension. What if everything you thought you needed, the people, the validation, the constant reassurance, was a substitute for the one thing you've avoided facing? That your self-worth was never supposed to be built on others. In the first place, do you see the contradiction? You feared being abandoned because you thought their presence defined you. But maybe you were abandoned precisely so you could discover you were never defined by them at all. This raises the question, one that cuts deeper than any blade of philosophy or psychology. If everyone leaves, and you are left with nothing but yourself, what remains? A hollow shell of dependence, or an unshakable core of dignity you had forgotten was there? This is the great paradox of self-respect. It often requires loss, sometimes catastrophic loss, to awaken it. It is as if the universe whispers, you will not find yourself until you have no one left to lose. And so here you stand, trembling, at the edge of a terrifying but necessary discovery. Do you understand now why this story matters? This is not about loneliness. This is not about abandonment. This is about the one truth most people never dare to confront, that your cannot be given, it must be claimed. And often, The only way you are forced to claim it is when everything external collapses. So, ask yourself, who are you when you have no one to impress? Who are you when no one applauds your efforts or validates your choices? Who are you when the only voice left in the room is your own? The story we are about to unfold is not about loss as tragedy. It is about loss as initiation. It is about the sacred, brutal process of being stripped of everything you once thought you were, so that you might finally remember who you have always been. And it begins with the very question that may haunt you even now. When losing everyone led me back to my self-worth, was it really a loss at all? Let's peel back the skin of this wound and see what's really there. Why is it that losing everyone feels like losing yourself? Why does the silence of an empty room feel like condemnation rather than simply the absence of sound? Why do we collapse when others walk away, as though they carried our very worth in their pockets? The truth is unsettling. From the very beginning, you were conditioned to see yourself not as a self-contained being, but as a reflection. Childhood, the first mirror as a child, you learned who you were through the eyes of others. Your parents smiled, and you felt lovable. They frowned, and you felt defective. A teacher praised you, and you glowed with significance. They scolded you, and you shrank with shame. Carl Jung once wrote, "The greatest burden a child must bear is the life of the parents." But perhaps an even heavier burden is this, the borrowed mirror of identity, because, from the start, your sense of self was outsourced. You weren't taught to be, you were taught to please. You weren't told you are worthy because you exist. You were told you are worthy because you perform, obey, impress, or make others comfortable. And so the seed was planted. You believed your worth was conditional, negotiable, fragile. Like glass, it had to be handled by others, never claimed as your own. Society, the invisible cage. As you grew older, society tightened the cage. Think about the subtle lessons you absorbed. Success makes you worthy. Beauty makes you valuable. Popularity makes you important. Sacrifice makes lovable. Nietzsche called this the herd morality, a system that trains you to measure yourself by standards that serve the collective, not the individual. Society does not thrive on your self-respect. It thrives on your compliance. If you doubt your worth, you will chase the approval of bosses, partners, friends, and strangers. You will consume, perform, obey, and so, without realizing it, you spend decades chasing reflections, never touching the substance beneath. Relationships. The sweet poison now enter relationships. At first, they feel like salvation. Someone chooses you, validates you, cherishes you, and, for a moment, the ache quiets. But soon, the same cycle repeats. You bend yourself into shapes to keep them. You bite your tongue to avoid conflict. You sacrifice pieces of your truth so you don't scare them away. Schopenhauer compared human beings to porcupines. We huddle together for warmth, but our quills wound each other. The closer we get, the more we risk pain. So, what do? We learn to bleed silently. We endure the wounds just to keep the warmth. But here's the hidden cost. Every time you choose their comfort over your dignity, you trade away a piece of self. And one day, you wake up hollow, dependent on the very people who do not see you clearly. This is the core mechanism at play. You were conditioned to believe that self-worth is external, that it is handed to you by others, that it can be revoked if you displease, disobey, or disappoint. So when people leave, it doesn't feel like just loss. sit feels like annihilation. Because if they are gone, then who are you? But here is the psychological and philosophical paradox. The worth you keep outsourcing was never theirs to give. It was always yours. Yet because you have never learned to hold it, losing people feels like losing life itself. The existential root. Jean-Paul Sartre once said, "Man is condemned to be free." What he meant is this: there is no pre-given meaning, no ultimate definition. You must create yourself. But instead of embracing this terrifying freedom, most of us hide behind the safety of roles. We let others define us: daughter, son, lover, friend, worker. So when those roles collapse, we are thrust back into the naked truth. We must stand alone, facing the void of freedom, and decide who we are without applause, without reassurance, and that terrifies us. The pain of silence, think about it. Why does silence hurt so much after abandonment? Because silence is the absence of mirrors. No one reflecting you back. No one telling you that you matter. But silence is also the first time you are forced to hear your own voice without distortion. And here lies the hidden problem. You've been taught to fear your own voice. So instead of listening, you scramble to fill the silence with new people, new distractions, new mirrors. But each attempt only deepens the addiction. Each attempt keeps you away from the one discovery you most need to make, that your self-worth was never in them. It was always in you. The psychological traps psychologists call this contingent self-esteem. It means your sense of value depends on achievements, approval, or relationships. The danger is obvious. When the external source disappears, your self-esteem collapses. Contrast this with true self-esteem, a sense of worth rooted not in what you do or who validates you, but in the fact that you exist. This is not arrogance. This is not ego. It is dignity. It is the quiet, unshakable knowing, I am enough, even if no one stays. But until you learn this, you will keep circling the same trap, desperate for belonging, terrified of abandonment, addicted to mirrors. Do you see now why losing everyone feels so catastrophic? It's not the people themselves, it's the way you believed they were your only source of meaning. Their leaving does not just empty your life, it empties your identity. But in that emptiness lies the doorway to transformation. The wound is not just pain, it is invitation. Because if you can endure the silence, if you can resist the urge to fill it with counterfeit worth, then you can finally confront the hidden problem head-on. You have been searching for yourself in others, when you were the source all along, and so the stage is set. The collapse is not the end, it is the unveiling. But before we explore freedom, we must understand the cost, because this hidden problem has consequences that ripple through your behavior, your relationships, your society, and even your very perception of reality. The next question we must confront is this: if you keep building your worth on the fragile foundation of others, what unseen consequences are already shaping your life without you realizing it? So far, we've uncovered the hidden mechanism. Your worth was conditioned to depend on others. But now comes the harder truth, the ripple effects. Because when you outsource your self-worth, it does not just hurt you in moments of abandonment. It shapes everything. Your choices, your relationships, your work, your inner dialogue, even your future. And the consequences are not always obvious. They creep in quietly, like cracks in a foundation, until one day the whole structure collapses. Consequence 1, the death of authenticity when your self-worth is external. You begin living as a performance. You laugh when you don't feel like laughing. You agree when every fiber of you screams no. You swallow words that burn your throat because you fear rejection more than self-betrayal. In psychological terms, this is called self-alienation, the split between who you are and who you pretend to be. At first, it feels small. A white lie here, a silence there. But over time, the performance becomes so habitual that you forget who you are underneath it. Nietzsche once warned, "He who despises himself still respects himself as one who despises." But when you abandon yourself for others, you lose even that. You don't just dislike yourself, you lose the self you could even like. The unseen consequence is this: authenticity withers, and with it, so does joy, because you cannot truly live if you are constantly shape-shifting to keep others from leaving. Consequence 2, the endless hunger when worth is borrowed. You develop an appetite that can never be satisfied. You crave compliments, reassurance, attention. You replay conversations to extract hidden meanings. A single criticism cuts deeper than it should, because it threatens the very ground you stand on. Psychologists call this the hedonic treadmill. No matter how much approval you gather, the hunger returns. Because approval is external, it fades as quickly as it arrives. So you chase harder. You scroll through social media, counting likes like breadcrumbs, leading to validation. You overwork, hoping recognition will silence the fear of invisibility. You enter relationships not out of abundance, but out of desperation for anyone to reflect you back. But here is the paradox. The more you chase, the emptier you feel, because external validation is like drinking salt water. It only deepens the thirst. Consequence 3, the corrosion of boundaries when self-respect is fragile. Boundaries feel dangerous. You say yes when you want to say no. You allow disrespect, manipulation, even abuse, because the fear of being left is greater than the pain of being diminished. This is why so many people stay in toxic relationships, exploitative jobs, and false friendships. It's not that they don't see the harm. It's that they've been conditioned to believe harm is the price of belonging. But each time you accept what violates your dignity, you send yourself a hidden message. My worth is less than their comfort, and that message corrodes you, drop by drop, until you no longer remember what self-respect feels like. Consequence 4, the cycle of abandonment. Ironically, building your worth on others often creates the very abandonment you fear. Why? Because when you suppress your truth, people don't connect with the real you. They connect with the mask. And masks are exhorting to you and to them. Over time, they drift away. And when they do, it confirms your deepest fear. I'm not enough. But what you don't see is that they didn't leave you, they left the performance. The tragedy is that you never gave them the chance to know you in the first place. Consequence 5, the collective disease. This isn't just personal, it's cultural. A society built on fragile self-worth becomes a society addicted to distraction, comparison, and consumerism. Why do advertisements work so well? Because they whisper the same lie you were raised on. You are not enough, lest you buy, achieve, attract. The result, an epidemic of quiet despair. People scrolling endlessly, comparing lives. People drowning in debt to impress others. People numbing themselves with substances, entertainment, noise, anything to avoid the silence where their own voice waits. And yet, beneath it all, the same unspoken wound, the loss of self-respect. Consequence 6, the war within but the deepest. Consequence is internal. When you betray yourself long enough, you create an inner civil war. One part of you longs for freedom to speak, to stand, to claim your dignity. Another part cowers, begging for belonging at any cost. The result is exhaustion, not just physical, but existential. You are tired not because life is hard, but because living against yourself drains more energy than anything else. Viktor Frankl, survivor of the concentration camps, once wrote, "When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves." The unseen consequence of abandonment is that it forces this confrontation. When everyone leaves, the war within can no longer be ignored. The emotional stakes. Let me ask you directly, how many years have you already lost in this war? How many nights have you stayed awake, replaying words you didn't say? How many times have you smiled while swallowing the taste of your own silence? And here's the cruelest twist. If you do not face this now, the cycle continues. You will keep attracting relationships that mirror your lack of self-respect. You will keep sabotaging yourself with choices rooted in fear, not dignity. You will keep handing your worth to others and resenting them for never holding it carefully enough. The pain you feel right now is not random. It is the debt of every moment you traded your self-respect for belonging. The revelation hidden in the consequence. But do you see this strange gift here? The collapse of relationships, the silence, the abandonment. It is not merely destruction, it is revelation. It reveals how fragile your foundation has been all along. It shows you the consequences not as punishment, but as proof. Proof that you cannot keep living this way. Proof that the old story must die, so that something truer can be born. And so we arrive at the threshold of rebellion. Because once you see the trap, you cannot unsee it. Once you taste the despair of contingent worth, you cannot go back to swallowing the poison. That the next step is dangerous, radical, and deeply necessary. It is the act of rebellion against everything you were taught. The question is no longer, what happens if I lose everyone? The question is, what happens if I stop losing myself? At some point, the suffering becomes unbearable. You realize you cannot keep living as a mirror, as an echo, as a shadow of yourself. And in that moment, often a night of loneliness, often after one more rejection, one more abandonment, you feel something shift inside you. It is not anger, though it feels sharp. It is not despair, though it comes out of the ashes of despair. It is rebellion. The rebellion against the life you were conditioned to accept. The rebellion against begging for scraps of worth. The rebellion against betraying yourself just to be loved. Step 1. Choosing silence as a weapon. For most of your life, silence felt like a punishment. When they ignored you, silence screamed your unworthiness. But what if silence could be reclaimed? The first act of rebellion is learning to sit in silence, not as absence, but as presence. To hear your own thoughts without immediately drowning them out. To breathe through the discomfort until you realize you are still here, even without applause. Philosopher Blaise Pascal once wrote, "All of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone." But the very thing that once terrified you, being alone, becomes the crucible of your self-respect. Because only in silence can you hear the voice that was buried beneath the noise of everyone else's expectations. Step 2. Drawing the line. Rebellion requires boundaries. And boundaries, to someone addicted to approval, feel like violence. But they are not violence. They are self-respect in action. The first time you say no, your chest will tighten. You'll fear losing them, and maybe you will. But notice what happens. You don't collapse. You don't die. You stand taller. You breathe deeper. Because every boundary you draw is not just a limit to others. It is a declaration to yourself. I will not trade my dignity for belonging. This is radical. It is dangerous, but it is necessary. The greatest reframe you can embrace is this: loss is not always punishment. Sometimes it is protection. Think of the people who left you. Was their absence truly a curse, or was it the clearing you needed to finally meet yourself? Nietzsche spoke of amor fati, the love of one's fate. To embrace even loss as necessary, even pain as teacher. Rebellion is not about clinging to those who abandoned you. It is about using their absence as the doorway back to yourself. When you stop fearing loss, you stop being controlled by it. And when you stop being controlled by it, you finally discover the freedom of self-respect. Rebellion is not only grand gestures, is daily practice. Speaking up when you would normally stay silent, resting when you would normally overwork, walking away from a conversation that drips with disrespect, choosing the meal you want, the clothes you love, the life that feels true. Each small act says, I choose myself, even if no one else does. And slowly, you begin to rewire the old conditioning. The brain learns through repetition. With every self-loyal act, you build a new foundation. This is not arrogance. This is not selfishness. This is the simple, radical truth. Respecting yourself is the prerequisite for any love worth having. Here is the paradox you must embrace. When you no longer need others to validate you, you finally become capable of genuine connection. Think about it. As long as you cling to them for worth, every relationship is poisoned by fear. But once you stand in your dignity, you can meet others as equals, not as saviors. You can love without begging. You can stay without clinging. You can lose without collapsing. This is what Sartre meant when he spoke of radical freedom. To choose, not out of desperation, but out of authenticity. Rebellion frees you from needing people, so that when you do choose them, it is love, not dependency. History is full of those who embodied this rebellion. Think of the monk who leaves behind wealth and family to sit in the stillness of a cave. Think of the artist who refuses to bend her vision to please critics, and in her solitude creates something eternal. Think of the survivor who, abandoned by everyone, builds a life of dignity so powerful that their very presence commands respect. Even in ordinary life, you have seen this. The friend who finally walked away from the toxic partner and discovered her strength. The colleague who stopped overworking for praise and started living for peace. The family member who chose honesty over conformity, even if it meant exile. They all embody the same truth. Rebellion against the false is the only path to the real. But make no mistake, rebellion has a price. You will lose people. You will scare others who are still addicted to mirrors. You will walk through seasons of loneliness deeper than you've ever known. But here's the secret. Loneliness in truth is better than belonging in lies. Because only in loneliness do you discover that you are never truly alone. You have yourself, and once you have yourself, you are no longer at the mercy of anyone's absence. So here you are, standing at the edge of the old life. On one side, the comfort of performance, the security of mirrors, the fragile worth that vanishes when others do. On the other side, the dangerous, liberating rebellion of self-respect. The question is no longer, will they stay? The question is, will you stay with yourself when everyone else leaves? Will you choose dignity over desperation? Will you risk rejection to reclaim respect? Rebellion begins in silence, grows in boundaries, matures in self-loyalty, and blossoms in freedom. But it does not end there, because beyond rebellion lies something even greater: truth. Not the fragile truth of roles and reflections, but the ultimate truth of who you are, when nothing can be taken from you. And that is where we must go next, because rebellion is only the doorway. The destination is revelation. Close your eyes and picture this. The room is empty. The voices have gone. The phone does not ring. You are left with nothing but silence on yourself. Once, this silence felt like a coffin. Now, it begins to feel like a temple. Because in the absence of everyone else, you finally meet the one person you had been avoiding all along, you. The story we've been tracing is not about abandonment, though it begins there. It is not about pain, though pain is its soil. It is about revelation, the revelation that losing everyone does not destroy you, it reveals you. Think of it. If your worth collapses when people leave, it means it was never really yours. But if, through the fire of loss, you discover that you still exist, still breathing, still thinking, still capable of love, then you realize a truth most people spend their whole lives avoiding. Your self-worth is not something anyone can give or take. It is the fact of your existence. The birth of inner authority. There comes a moment in every journey when you stop looking outward for the verdict of your life. You stop asking, am I good enough? Do they love me? Do I matter? And you begin to ask a different question. Do I respect myself? This shift is seismic, because the moment you measure yourself not by the mirrors of others, but by the compass of your own dignity, you become untouchable. Not untouchable as in arrogant, not invulnerable as in unfeeling, but untouchable in the sense that no one can make you smaller than the truth of who you are. This is what Viktor Frankl discovered in the camps. Stripped of everything: family, freedom, future, he realized that the last of human freedoms is to choose one's attitude, to claim one's inner authority. And that is the ultimate truth. Respect is not something you beg for. It is something you decide to live from. Here's the paradox. When you stop chasing others for worth, life begins to open in ways you never imagined. When you respect yourself, you stop begging. When you stop begging, you start choosing. And when you start choosing, you begin living not as a reflection, but as a source. You discover that love feels different when it is chosen freely, not out of desperation. Work feels different when it is aligned with your truth, not performed for applause. Even loneliness feels different. It transforms into solitude, into space, into freedom, because the absence of others no longer means the absence of worth. It simply means the presence of you. Imagine yourself as a tree. For years, your roots were shallow, stretching only toward the footsteps of others. When they left, the soil collapsed, and you toppled. But through the fire of loss, your roots begin to grow downward into yourself. And for the first time, you stand not because the wind is gentle, but because your foundation is real. This is the unshakable core of self-respect, the knowing that even if every leaf falls, even if every branch breaks, the root remains, and from that root, life begins again. This truth redefines love itself. For most of your life, you loved as dependency. Stay, because without you, I am nothing. Now, love becomes choice. Stay, if you wish, but I remain whole, even if you don't. And paradoxically, This is the only love that lasts, because it is no longer poisoned by fear, clinging, or desperation. It is free, and therefore it is real. When you respect yourself, you no longer fear abandonment. And when you no longer fear abandonment, you stop twisting yourself into shapes just to be kept. This means those who stay for the real you, not the mask. And suddenly, connection deepens. Because nothing is more magnetic than someone who does not need to be chosen to know they are worthy. So what is the ultimate truth of our journey? It is this: you are not defined by who stays or who leaves. You are defined by whether you stay with yourself. Every loss, every silence, every abandonment was not the end of you. It was the stripping away of illusions. They left, but you remained. They withdrew their love, but you discovered a deeper love, the love of self-respect. This is not narcissism. It is not selfishness. It is the recognition that without self-respect, every form of love collapses into need, and with self-respect, every form of love becomes pure. So imagine it now. You walk into a room. You are not the loudest, not the most adored, not the most applauded, but you stand tall, because you are no longer asking anyone to define you. Imagine facing rejection and not collapsing, because you know rejection does not erase your dignity. Imagine being alone and not panicking, because you know solitude is not emptiness. It is space for your own soul to breathe. Imagine love that is chosen, not begged for, work that is true, not performed, a life that is yours, not borrowed. This is not fantasy. This is what becomes possible when you anchor yourself in the truth. Losing everyone led you back to your self-worth, and in doing so, you never truly lost at all. Picture yourself standing at the edge of the ocean at dawn. Behind you, the wreckage of relationships and roles washed away by the tide. In front of you, the horizon glows with new light. You are barefoot, alone, and yet, for the first time, you do not feel abandoned. You feel accompanied by yourself. The waves crash, the sun rises, and you whisper not to the world, not to anyone else, but to yourself, I am here. I am enough, and I am mine. And with that, the story closes. Not with the return of those who left, not with the applause of the crowd, but with something infinitely more powerful, the quiet, unshakable dignity of someone who has lost everything externally to discover they had everything internal all along. Because this is the truth that changes everything. You did not lose them. You found you.